Hello, welcome to Science Radio. My name's Jesse. I'm joined by my co host today, Zanita. Hello, Zanita.
Hello, Jesse.
And we are also joined by Melody Tan. Hello, Melody.
Hello.
We're so stoked to have you on the podcast today. You are a wonderful member of our editorial team, and you are the director of Mums at the Table. Just for those few people who don't know what Mums at the Table is, would you just be able to quickly tell us what it is and what you do with it?
It's not a cooking show, just to clarify, because some people have thought that's what we do, because Mom's Table, we cook. Basically, we're a multimedia initiative that aims at supporting moms through education, so through the website resources, information, as well as through community. So we create local groups in local communities for moms to get together and make mom friends and support each other.
Now, you work a little bit with us because a lot of our ministry stuff overlaps, which is really awesome. And you recently wrote an article for us called The Mum Load. What do you mean when you talk about the mum load?
So the mom load, I guess it's a bit of an extension to the mental load that has been bandied around for a little while. It's basically the mental load that a person has, but when I talk about the mom load, it's then the added load, I suppose, to put it that way, where a person has not just for themselves and their household, but for a whole extra person or two or three or more, depending on how many kids you have.
Is there such a thing also, obviously you've mentioned the mum load, is there also such a thing as a dad load? Because obviously we have mums have a lot of roles, but we've also got dads who are working and who are probably have mechanical things on their minds or house fixing things on their minds, or they still want to be with their children.
It's an interesting concept, and I'm trying to shy away from making it a gender thing, but the reality is that it is a little bit of a gender thing. Studies have showed that even though in a family, even though if both parties work full time and have children together, the women are generally the one that do more of the work, more of the household chores anyway. And so because of that, it it's a natural progression in which therefore when it comes to caring for the child, the main load of caring for the child also falls on the mom. The mental load, it's a lot about what needs to happen in a household for a household to function. And if women are the ones that are primarily doing that work, then yes, the mom, maybe it can be called a parent load, but really it becomes more of a mom load than a dad load.
I think that that's an important distinction to make because different relationships look different, but different parenting situations look different as well. There are single mums out there who have to play the role of mum and dad in many cases. And I guess the reverse is also true. There are single dads out there. I was talking to a couple of mums the other day about this, and they said, "Oh, I know a dad who is basically he's a stay-at-home dad, and his wife or partner earns the majority of the money and he just does musician stuff on the side. So he gets to take care of the kids and vacuum the floors and make the food." So I guess it's across the board. There's many different ways to do it. But I think, as you've highlighted, Melody, not traditionally, but I think typically, potentially, the responsibility falls more on the mum. I know that growing up, my dad was a bit of a workaholic and he was always out working on the farm as a farmer does. And mum was stuck at home most of the day taking care of the kids, but also housework and bills and those things that need to happen to make as you say, the household function and run so that dad can come home and have a house to come home to.
I guess it's also important to distinguish between the actual physical job of doing something versus the mental load, which is, it's not just about the cooking the meals, it's knowing whether you have the ingredients for it in the fridge already, in the pantry for it. It's about planning for it. It's about laying out the table. It's making sure that you have enough portions for seconds, you have enough for lunch the next day, whether it can even be packed for lunch the next day. About doing the dishes, it's knowing whether you have enough dish soap or dishwasher tablets. It's about whether you need to empty the dishwasher or the dish drying rack after. Laundry, it's not just about doing the laundry, it's knowing whether you need to run an extra load because a certain item of clothing needs to be worn tomorrow and so it needs to dry tonight. Or that you're running out of undies, or that you are going to be running out of detergent. So it's about knowing, it's having all those things at the back of your head ticking, and it's not just a physical act of doing something.
They say that men also have a nothing box. I don't know if you can confirm this, Jessie, but
I can
so maybe
definitely.
they have the ability to just like zone out a little bit more, whereas I think women tend to have this running checklist. Like you say, it's about all these tiny little things that, can just slip people's minds.
I can definitely confirm. Maybe it's a coping mechanism, or I don't know what it is. But as Melody was listing all the things, I started to think, oh, okay, I get it now. Like, I do a lot of that stuff, whether it's cooking or cleaning or whatever, but I'm not thinking about all that stuff. I just take it as it comes. If we run out of undies or we run out of dish soap, I'll just deal with it. I'm not thinking about it beforehand. And that's probably very frustrating for a lot of women to have a husband who doesn't really think about these things. And in fact, that's something that my partner tells me all the time. You got to think ahead. You got to think about this stuff. And I'm just like, I try, but sometimes I just feel like I do not have the capacity to do it at the level that sometimes feels necessary.
You're basically, they stay at home moms, right? There's this joke saying that, oh, to make yourself feel better, you can title yourself the CEO of your household. But it really is that. Like, they are really running like the CEO because they are strategizing, they are time managing, and they are planning, they're delegating tasks. And even just the act of asking someone, can you take the bins out because it's bin night, means that they've actually thought about the fact that it's bin night. They remember that it's bin night, and that task needs to be done, and I need to ask someone to do it.
I can definitely confirm that the bins wouldn't go out on the street probably half the time if my wife didn't remind me every other time. Like, sometimes she'll be like, have you put the bins out? And I'll be like, yes, darling, I put them out 3 hours ago. But more often than not, it's, oh yeah, oh whoops, it's 10 o'clock at night and they need to go out. Whoops.
At least it's not I hear the truck, let's go.
Yeah, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Are there certain, I know communication comes easy for some people, but for some people, they just don't know where to start. Are there certain kind of ways that you would advise people, like if their partner is completely oblivious to the mental load that they're carrying, are there certain ways that they can communicate that well to their partner and help them like understand where they're coming from?
It's a really tricky thing. I think it comes both ways as well. Yes, it is imperative that we try to get the men in our lives to understand that we have this mom load and that we've got this basically thing that's constantly running through in our heads. Yeah, it's basically about having that chat and having them understand and explaining it this way. If you don't have the words to explain it, there are plenty of Instagram reels and TikTok shorts out there that actually explains what the mental load is. And if you can't explain it, just let them watch a few of those and they'll probably, hopefully get it. But I think the other thing as well is to recognize for yourself that you probably need to take a step back as well. It's something that I had to learn myself as well, because my husband, as much as I love him, does have a nothing box as well. And the thing is not that he doesn't want to help, it's just that he's a bit, shall we say, in comparison, a bit slower in helping. And
That's
so,
a very charitable way to put it, Melody. I'm sure all the dads out there are going, oh, thank you. Yes, that feels good.
I find that has helped me a lot as well, because I want to get this thing done because I'm planning ahead. I'm planning 3 steps ahead. And so I'm like, if you get this done now, then there's 2 steps you can miss and then it can get done now. But the reality is that I've learned to take a few steps back myself, slow down a little bit myself, and instead of being 3 steps ahead, 1 step ahead, half a step ahead. And my husband will surprise me by actually doing it at the point of time when it's half a step ahead. And so taking that step back and actually deciding that this is not going to be part of my mental load sometimes does help as well.
So there's an Australian survey that you cite in your article that tells us that On average, females spend 4 hours and 31 minutes every day doing unpaid work activities. By comparison, men spend over an hour less. And less than half of males, so 42%, spend time on housework compared to 70% of females. Furthermore, a little later in the article, you talk about how in the same report it says that mums spend an average of 3.5 hours participating in childcare activities every single day, with dad spending just over 2 hours. So I want to talk a little bit about the child aspect. That's probably the one thing that we haven't directly addressed quite yet, because it's one thing to have a household that you're trying to run between you and your partner. It's an entirely other thing when children enter into the equation. Can you talk to us a little bit about how having the baby that then grows up into a slightly larger baby, how does that affect the mum load?
Exponentially. You're basically in charge and responsible for someone else's life then. Like, you want to teach your kids responsibility, and you want to let them be independent. But during that learning stage, you still need to be responsible to a certain extent. While when it's a baby stage, it's making sure that there are enough nappies, making sure that if they're cloth nappies, making sure that they're washed. If you're formula feeding, making sure that there's formula around. If you're feeding, making sure that there's food around for the baby. The other thing would be, and moms are probably more guilty of doing this, and that is to making sure that they're meeting all the developmental milestones, whether it's something to be worried about, whether it's something that they need to take to the doctors about, or whether it's just a sit and wait kind of situation. When the kids go to school, that becomes a whole new different level. You then keep track of when sports uniform day is, whether you signed the consent form for an excursion, are you contributing to the PNF funds for teachers' gift, when photo day is, have they packed their library bag, what's in their lunchbox. And it's not just a lunchbox. I've learned you've got crunch and sip, you've got morning tea, and if they go to after school care, it's afternoon tea. There are a lot of food boxes when it comes to children. With my son, I try to get to the point where it's your responsibility. If you don't remember that Friday is library day and you don't pack your library bag, too bad, so sad. But yeah, at the same time, at the back of your head, you also kind of want to nudge. It's like, hey, what's special tomorrow? It's Friday tomorrow. What do you need to pack? So you may not be saying the words, but you're still nudging them in the right direction.
I suppose it's only up to a certain age that you can get them to do that. But I've heard for mums, they get in this cycle of they've obviously got this mental load that they're carrying and they're stressing about a million different things. And then they start to feel guilty about that because when they're stressed, they're not, I guess, interacting with their children as they would like to be. They're not playing with their children as much as they would like to be. And so then they feel guilty for not being like a good enough mum, and then the cycle just continues. Have you experienced that feeling as well? And how can people, I guess, manage that better?
It is a terrible cycle.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go away. I talked to a parenting expert once, and she once mentioned to me that when you give birth to a child, you also give birth to this thing called guilt at the same time.
Huh.
And it's actually really true. Like, it happens. And you're right. You are stressing about everything, and then you start thinking about stuff and you're not present. And then you start feeling guilty about being not present. And then you try to be present, but then you feel guilt. And it's difficult. This is actually another advice that I got from another parenting expert that I spoke to. And she actually mentioned the fact that for all the tips that parenting experts give, all the things that you should be doing, being present, not giving them screen time, helping them emotionally regulate, all the correct things that you should be doing as a parent, you really only need to get it right 3 out of 10 times. And that is a really low bar, a really achievable bar. And it really helps to alleviate the guilt. I'm not talking about the minimum standards that you need to give a child. You need to meet their needs and love them and be there for them and provide them for their needs. But I'm talking about all the other extras that are supposed to be good for their development, supposed to be good for their regulation. Get it right 3 out of 10 times. Let them know that you love them, and that's enough.
That feels like the sort of bar that a lot of mothers would struggle to go, okay, 3 out of 10. I can do 3 out of 10. I feel like a lot of mothers would go, no, I have to do it 10 out of 10, or at least 9, 8,
11
or
out of 10.
yeah, yeah, even better. But giving yourself
It's
that
true.
space to not feel that guilt, that, I guess, if you can embrace that, that must be pretty freeing.
I'm still personally, I'm still struggling with it as well, but it really does. It's a constant reminder because I'm the kind of person who wants to strive 11, 12 out of 10 and thinking that I need to get it right all the time. Hearing that was very freeing. It doesn't mean that it goes away, it doesn't mean that the guilt goes away, but it's about looking back and knowing, hey, actually, I'm getting it right most of the time. And there is a concept of rupture and repair as well. So basically, if you don't get it right, you repair it. So, say for example, if you, instead of emotionally regulating with your kid and staying calm with your kid, you lose it, you yell at them. When everyone is calmer, repair that and say, hey, you know what? I shouldn't have yelled at you. I did the wrong thing. I wasn't in the right state of mind.
Often I think people don't recognize how impactful that reconciliation or that asking for forgiveness is because it's not modeled to them very often. But there can actually be a lot of power in that apology, and in that a lot of growth can come in relationships from that experience.
Healing. It's really healing, as much for me as well as for my son. And it's also letting him realize that perfection isn't necessary. We all make mistakes.
Are there certain ways that you've learnt to manage that mental load a bit? I know some mums, they try to, like, before they go to bed, write everything on paper so they don't stay awake at night. But is there something that's worked for you in helping with that?
I think the two things which I've alluded to that has really worked for me is letting go, realizing that some things don't have to be part of my mental load. Like ensuring that the car, our family car, is topped up and filled with petrol isn't on my mental load. My husband does that. And so if he can do that, there are other things that I can relinquish as well, that I can choose to relinquish and let him take it. Probably the better thing to do is to discuss it and say that, hey, could you be responsible for this? And I'm not going to think about it, instead of just silently withdrawing and go, haha, it's your responsibility and I'm not going to tell you about it. But that has really helped me to ease the load that I have, and also realizing and slowing down, realizing that my husband is capable of doing it as well. Maybe not as quickly as I would like it to do, but he will get it done. So, hey, relax and go watch Netflix or something.
I can speak to that as well, because for those of you who don't know, I've got a 2-month-old baby, and that can be, Melody, you know what it's like to have a young baby. The first one especially is really hectic and very overwhelming and very difficult. And there have been times when I felt completely useless. I'll be trying to settle the baby, put her to sleep. She'll be screaming her head off. And as soon as I put her in the hands of her mum or her grandmother, she'll just settle down. And I'll just be like, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? And that's one whole side of it. But the point is, I have actually found a lot of new joy in taking responsibility for other things, maybe some other things that I already had responsibility for, whether it's cooking the meals or making sure that our car insurance is paid or making sure the car is filled up or getting groceries or purchasing that thing off Amazon for my wife so that she can have some more comfort or whatever. And feeling like I'm contributing in a way that's not just like tokenistic or just to make me feel better is actually awesome, when I feel like there's certain parts that I haven't quite mastered yet, or that I'm still struggling in the relationship, in the household. So I guess what I'm saying is feeling useful and like I'm actually contributing when I feel like I can't contribute in other ways, or me doing a certain thing is a pale comparison to the way that my wife can do it, whether it's with the baby or with other aspects, is really helpful, I think. And ultimately, if it helps her and helps the family, then that's the best outcome, right?
What you've mentioned actually reminded me of the very, very first conversation that I had with my husband surrounding this whole mum load thing. It was at the same stage as well. Like, I think our baby was a few months old, a few weeks old, and I was trying to do everything and I was trying to keep on top of everything. And it was to the point where I was falling apart. And that was when we had a real conversation with my husband where he went, I'm here to and I want to help. And it's recognizing, I think it's also like for ourselves, recognizing that we do have a partner who wants to help. And yes, maybe at the beginning, it feels like delegating. Oh, it's another job that I have to teach someone to do. But then delegate, do it, and then forget about it. And then it's no longer part of your mental load.
It would be remiss of me to not mention, I think the part of the article that I think a lot of people are probably going to find the most value in is that really vulnerable part where you talk about it as a breakdown. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that? What was that like and how did you get through it?
It was it was pretty much a breakdown. As with life, it's not just one trigger, right? There's a lot of things that were happening, and it was at the point of time when I had a lot of things happening at the time. There was unresolved grief, there was unresolved trauma, and then there was all the mental load that was happening as well. And it started gradually. Initially I thought it was just stress, which it was, but I started crying uncontrollably for over the littlest of things. And the little things would just trigger me and I would just cry, and I thought, oh, I'm just being sensitive and I'm just being sad, because I cry a lot more since I've become a mom anyway. Every single episode of Bluey drives me to tears. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's the reason why. But then it got worse and I just was getting tired. I didn't have any more drive in my life. And yeah, it culminated to the point where I got home from work one day and the house was empty. And I just felt this overwhelming amount of sadness. I just could not stop crying. And it was the ugly cry where you're bawling. And my husband and son came home from school, from work, found me like this. Usually before, like sometimes I do get sad and I cry and I'll be able to stop it before they come back. But this time they came back, I could not stop. I was still crying. I could not communicate what was happening and they just had to leave me. And I was just in a ball on the floor in the dark, just crying. So that was the breakdown that I had. And my husband stepped up, and that was actually a turning point, because that was when he stepped up. And it wasn't as if meals weren't cooked, lunch boxes weren't packed, library bags were remembered. He stepped up. He did it all. And yeah, we had a talk about it. After that, he asked me what was going on. It took a while for me to recognize what was going on myself. Like, it was hard to figure out what it was. But part of the reason was the fact that I just had too much going on in my head, and I just could not cope with all the balls that were up in the air.
Yeah, I was going to ask if that was something that you had words for at the time, if you understood your reaction, or if that was something that
it was really, it took a few days of talking it through, thinking it through, and talking it through with my best friend as well, and just processing it and having, it was a journey trying to figure out what was it that was happening.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know, Melody, because obviously you work full-time, nearly full-time, and a mother as well. And I know that a lot of people these days, maybe they would like to, I think a lot of mums would like to be stay-at-home mums and be doing that, but just because of how life is these days, they can't afford it, and so they have no choice but also to work and provide an income. How have you found, do you separate the mental load of work and children, or does that all just get mushed in? Because I think most women listening, I would say probably most women are also carrying a job, or at one point will have to carry a job. Like, how do they handle that tension of like multiple roles, multiple jobs kind of thing?
I have a spreadsheet.
Nice.
So it really has to be organizing. And if you really don't want to hold the mental load all to yourself, you need to have that weekly meeting. It sounds like a meeting. It sounds like you're going to talk to your husband for half an hour in a boardroom or anything like that. But it's really just, sometimes it takes 10 minutes to just connect. And I found that having a shared Google Calendar, like with my husband, helps. And so we put things on. I'm guilty as well. I'll put things on and then I won't tell him anything about it. And he finds out on the calendar that, oh, this is happening. So luckily we have a shared calendar because then he knows what's happening as well. Yeah, basically it's having that kind of shared time management planner kind of thing and really just relinquishing it and saying that, hey, this is not something that I can do. And the reality is potentially your partner is going to forget it the first time, the second time, the third time. Hopefully by the fourth time, they'll remember. Instead of going, hey, I'm going to take that back, just let them keep going at it. And eventually, I'm sure it will stick.
What advice would you give to a mum who is feeling the mental load but hasn't found the words to explain to their partner or to express how they're feeling? Do they need to go through a breakdown also in order to get that clarity? What do you reckon?
Please don't go through a breakdown. It's not pretty and it's not fun. I think the first thing is to just give yourself some slack. I go back to the whole you don't have to get it right 12 out of 10 times. 3 out of 10 is enough. And if you really get it wrong, it's okay. It's something that I'm trying to teach my son as well. Mistakes happen, mistakes are fine. It's how you react after that. It's about trying to fix the mistake and it's about seeing what you learn from the mistake. So get it wrong, let it go wrong. It's fine. Give yourself some slack. You don't have to be perfect.
Well, hey, thank you, Melody. I really appreciated the article and I appreciated you talking to us today. Thank you very much. If people want to get in touch with you and or Mums at the Table, how do they do that?
Well, the easiest way would be mumsatathetable.com.